Since the foundation of the state in 1923, there have been 138 by-elections to fill 140 vacancies in Dáil Éireann, with 2 more on the way next Friday in Dublin Central and Galway West. Most of these contests, if not all, were triggered by the death of a sitting TD. 93 in total, Vincent and Richard, 93 in total, which tells you something about how often these elections aren't political choices so much as sudden necessities. So, welcome to the Atlantic Current Podcast. I'm Tull from the Irish Politics Letter, and as always, I'm with Vince Martin from Wall Street in Maine, and tonight we have a very special guest also.
Yeah, we do. We're talking again about the by-elections as we did a couple of weeks ago. We wanted to bring on some extra firepower. I like that intro there. We did a little bit of work trying to look at the history of these by-elections, as you said, 138 of them. Interestingly, there have been kind of stretches where they don't happen. Right? You've gone as long as a decade without by-elections, and entire Dáil have gone without by-elections, and there have been a couple of trends over time. One of the big trends, and I'm sure you guys might want to talk about this a little bit, is the fact that the numbers of candidates are far, far higher than they used to be, right? It's now pretty common to have 10, 15 candidates in a way that wasn't the case a few decades ago. And of course, in those times, things were a little more chaotic. The record is 1925, there were 9 vacancies, 7 constituencies, all held with by-elections. Since then, they're a little bit simpler format, although they still have quite a bit of intrigue, complication, even a little bit of chaos. So we're going to have our special guest help us navigate that with the elections coming up on Friday.
Yes, folks, if by-elections were a sport, tonight's guest would be the sort of person who could tell you the score, the referee's family history, which local councillor sold his soul. He knows by-elections the way the taxman knows all your receipts, intimately, suspiciously, and with a faint sense of disappointment in humanity. Because when a seat falls vacant, democracy doesn't pause for dignity. It produces what we call in Ireland a by-election. In the United States, you call them special elections, Vincent. It's a glorious little emergency elections where parties panic, pundits swoon, and voters are asked to care deeply about a contest they'll have forgotten about by the next day. And nobody understands that better than our current guest, Richard Collumb. A minister once told me that he was the best director of elections ever, would you believe? So, I'm glad to have you on as our first guest. I had to beat off Nobel laureates and all manner of prize-winning scientists to ensure that you were our first guest. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It is great to be here, and obviously no pressure at all for being the first guest, beating out the likes of Krugman, McWilliams, and Lord knows who else.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Richard, for taking the time to come on and talk to us about the by-elections. First and foremost, let's start with Dublin Central. Has there anything jumped out at you that is something special about this by-election in particular?
Well, apart from the €1 million on Polymarket that seems to be going on to Hutch and then taken off him, which is very interesting. We haven't seen that before. That's certainly new.
And of course, we must say that there's no inclination of anybody doing anything wrong by anything, on this, because we do not want to get sued on this podcast. Do you have in the back of your head how this is going to pan out? Transfer-wise?
The challenge with somewhere like Dublin Central, and I know you've gone through it before, is where it is as an urban constituency and has historically very low turnout. So that makes it challenging. But also the fact that it's low turnout and a by-election where you also generally get lower turnout means that getting out your own vote is going to be very important. And I think that will probably help Sinn Féin in terms of its Mary Lou's constituency. You would think that will help Janice Boylan on her first preference, if nothing else. But I don't think that she will have enough in the tank at the end, because I think Daniel Ennis of the Social Democrats will be more transfer friendly and the least worst option for a lot of other potential people who are voting down the ticket, as you do on a by-election where it's not your first preference that's important. You need to get to 50.1%. I think Adams of Fine Gael will do better than people are saying. I think he'll come in third. I think he's then well positioned for a Dáil run, which I think is primarily what they want out of it. I think there's a lot of noise, but very little else about Hutch. I don't think he's going to do as well as people think. and he will transfer all of place primarily, I think, to Sinn Féin or places like that. Beyond that, then I think the big news as well for Fianna Fáil are like they're on 4%, which is effectively what Bertie's running mate used to get back in the day in this constituency, where Bertie would get about 20%, 25 more percent, and drag in the second person on his surplus. So for what would have been Fianna Fáil heartland with Bertie Ahern, it is just a absolute disaster. There's no other way of putting it for them. There's no way to gloss it in any way, shape or form. And them just coming off their 100-year Ordesh celebrations this week, it'll end the party very quickly in terms of the cold light of day and the dawn of what's going to happen. And that's one to watch longer term for Micheál Martin's longer term ability to stay in. But I think Ennis gets it for the Social Democrats. He'll be more transfer friendly. The Green Party will do well on transfers, but won't be strong enough in the first preference. And quite frankly, for the Social Democrats, they'll have great fun then in the general election, because they'll have 2 sitting TDs in a 4-seat constituency, and only one of them will make it. So I think that Gary Gannon and Daniel Ennis will be all smiles come Saturday, but come Sunday, the eyes will be out for each other.
True. Yeah, there's no political enemies like frenemies, is there? And I have to admit this, I heard this on another podcast, a rival podcast called Path to Power. And the last time Fianna Fáil won a by-election when they were in government was in 1982.
Whoa.
That's it.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was that far back. That's what, 44 years, 45 years?
45, 44, 45 years, yeah.
So if you can imagine that, Vincent, somebody from the Democrats or Republican Party not winning a special election for 45 years, that would be unheard of in the United States, obviously, wouldn't it?
Yeah, of course. But where we have a 2-party system, as bad as one of these parties is, eventually the other party's going to up enough that they're going to win something, essentially.
Yes. And the last time Fine Gael won a by-election when they were in power was after the tragic passing of Nicky McFadden and her sister Gabrielle McFadden won in 2014. That was the last time a government party, a sitting government party, won a by-election 2014. That was over 10 years ago.
That kind of by-election will be a little bit of an exception, because that's the family dynasty seat that is well known in Irish politics, going right the way back to the foundation of the state. And before that, the best people you can have is a close relative, or certainly outside of Dublin, a GAA star. Inside of Dublin, sometimes it's a little bit different.
Is the Hutch element been overblown?
I think it is. I think there's a media side of it that it's a good story for them to be able to add a bit of spice to what is otherwise a relatively run-of-the-mill by-election. I just think that if you're doing opinion polling and it's a name recognition thing, but I would have thought that a lot of the people who might be inclined to vote for him are probably the people who are least likely to vote. So there's that disconnect as well. And that is a challenge. So it's trying to turn out your own vote. And that's where people like Ray McAdam, where his vote will be, they're more likely and more inclined to go out and vote. So that will help him a bit more versus maybe, say, some of the places where Hutch might get his vote from.
I'm going to ask a Yank question. In each of the 3 presidential elections Donald Trump has participated in, he's outperformed his polls relatively significantly, even in 2020, because there is a sense that people who wanted to vote for him wouldn't tell pollsters that that's what they were going to do. Does someone like Hutch, who has, can we say, a colorful history? Does that keep us on the right side of libel laws? Is there any sense that that's possible for a candidate like that in Ireland, or do you think that's comparing apples to bananas here?
Yeah, a bit of apples to bananas. And the reason is I think that his second preference will be kind of pretty low. And even if you look at the general election last time round, like he did quite well for a while and then he pretty much plateaued. I'd say there's a number of people within that constituency who won't say anything in terms of their voting preference, but will silently vote in other ways, knowing the history of where his colourful past might lead him.
The first thing that struck me about the poll last weekend, the Irish Times poll, TG Carr poll, was that by-election polls are tricky and very often they're a bit mad. And I have a sneaky feeling that Janice Boylan's support at 21% is a little bit overestimated. I'm looking at Jana Horner, Daniel Ennis, Janice Boylan, Ray McAdam, a couple of other people that are running also. And Ray McAdam had topped the poll in that constituency in the local elections, running against all the same people. So I'm just wondering how strong that Janice Boylan vote actually really is. You know, I think she wasn't in the running at all at the general election because she got such a low preference. But of course, she's in the constituency with Mary Lou McDonald, who was always going to get a massive vote. But I was really, really surprised about how little Mary Lou McDonald transferred to Janice Boylan. So I just wonder what's going on there with the Sinn Féin vote.
Well, the other thing to say is that, you know, you're probably talking, it's a poll probably of what, around 500 people maybe. Having done constituency polling in the past, myself, internal polls, it can get very tricky because it's how you do them. It's how you can cluster it. You can get a rogue road or a rogue box where, you know, the candidate's cousin twice removed lives on the road, and that can actually make a big difference, knowing Ireland as it is. So yeah, there's a much greater wider margin of error on these ones. Just looking at past performance in some of these areas, a lot of the Sinn Féin vote, I think, some of it can be attributed to a Mary Lou vote, and possibly with her as well, some soft Fianna Fáil vote, because, you know, way back historically, though she doesn't like to mention it, she did start off her days
in Fianna Fáil, yeah.
In Fianna Fáil. So there is a certain level of that, but I do think that I think that you might see, well, top three, I would say. I'd take Hutch maybe slightly down, but I think you'd see Boylan, Ellis, McAdams, maybe even Horner ahead of Hutch if I was looking at it on when the box is open Saturday morning.
Right. That's what you're going for. So is it, are you going to nail your colours to the mast there?
I'm going to nail my colours that Ennis is going to win it. How about that?
Yeah, I think we're both agreed there, and I've actually predicted on the podcast. I said, don't be surprised if McAdam finishes second. Unlikely, it probably will be Janice Boylan.
I think he'll definitely get his elimination. If it is an elimination, we'll get Ennis over the line over Boylan, without a shadow of a doubt.
Yes, it's by-election madness. There was a convicted killer pictured during the week out canvassing for Janice Boylan and canvassing for Sinn Féin. The man, Eamon Nolan, was convicted of murdering an innocent man in a bank in Tramore in County Waterford a number of years ago. Quite a vicious and wanton, gratuitous murder where the victim was lying there dying in front of his 3-year-old boy who was kneeling beside him, and he was kicked as the bank robbers tried to make their escape. And I think myself and Richard have seen this a number of times over the years, haven't we, Richard, with Sinn Féin candidates bringing people with very, how can I say, bad pasts out on the doorsteps with them. Vincent, do you have any convicted murderers canvassing with your candidates in the United States?
There have certainly been quite a few felons, now pardoned felons, who committed various crimes on January 6th, who have been out canvassing with Republican politicians or endorsing them. Or one Republican county board here in North Carolina hosted somebody who had been convicted of felonies based on their activities on January 6th. So it's not quite the same thing, certainly, but you can see that. And there have been people on the left who committed political violence during the 1960s who were somewhat rehabilitated within the Democratic Party in the 80s and 90s. That was even an issue when Obama ran in 2008, some of his connections to those people.
Right. Freedom fighters, they like to call them. Other names other people like to call them.
Yeah,
for
sure.
Richard, is it in your view, do by-elections matter?
They have done in the past, yeah. Your bold told down in Cork, you'll know that your own people stabbed the great Jack Lynch after he lost 2 by-elections in the
79, yes.
79. 78 was or 77 had the biggest majority known to man for however long, and a runaway success in the 77 general election. And within a couple of years, loses a couple of by-elections in his own backyard in Cork, and that led to his untimely demise as a leader of Fianna Fáil, and brought in through various different ways Charles Haughey, who was, let us say, a colourful character in his own right.
Yes, Charlie Haughey, the great corrupter of Irish politics, no less. 2 very consequential politicians. I think Jack Lynch kind of said he knew the writing was on the wall and decided to go quite dignified rather than have a big hullabaloo over it. But I think Micheál Martin is intent on causing as much fuss as possible before he goes, and I think it's just as well that they had their Ardèche, their national conference last weekend. But I mean, if it was on Saturday or Sunday this weekend, there might have been Marie Antoinette scenes, guillotines in the hallways of the Ardèche and stuff like that.
He is very lucky that there is an EU presidency from July to December, that Ireland is hosting that. If it wasn't, I think he would have been gone for the high jump. But I suspect that come Christmas after that, there'll be a lot of talking turkey within Fianna Fáil as to what's going to happen. Their challenge is, yes, you can change your leader, but as other parties have found out in the past, changing your leader doesn't necessarily is a panacea. We just need to look over at the UK and the Tory party, where they've been going through leaders in the last few years. There were other by-elections of consequence, I think. In the 1990s, we saw a change of government as a result of a couple of by-elections. So it was a Fianna Fáil Labour government, and then the Rainbow government of Fine Gael, the Workers' Party, Democratic Left, they were the Workers' Party, and Labour, because Democratic Left won a couple of by-elections and it swung the balance of power. Now, they themselves then only had like the slimmest of slimmest majorities, probably one seat, and then ultimately they probably had to go to the country earlier than they wanted to, because they started losing by-elections 2 or 3 years later. So there are times where by-elections can make a difference. Realistically, these two won't. To an extent of the overall political landscape, I think probably for Fianna Fáil they will. So there's a difference there, and possibly even Sinn Féin.
That was my next question. Micheál Martin knows he's on the way out, I think, and I think it's less danger signs here for him than it is for Mary Lou McDonald, because the word on the street in Galway, and I have a brother in Galway he keeps his ear to the ground, but who's apolitical, hates everybody, and he was telling me that it looks like Sinn Féin have packed their bags and they're giving up the ghost on Galway West. So we'll come to Galway West now. But I mean, if Mary Lou McDonald can't get Janice Boylan over the line in her own back garden, I think the alarm bells are there.
I think if you look at what's happening in Galway, a constituency where they did quite well in the general election, they're probably going to be off getting eliminated, in and around the same time as Into or someone like that. So they're nowhere near the races on that one. And they've obviously made a lot of missteps, whether it's saying that their candidate can speak Irish when he clearly couldn't, which in a constituency like this is very important, because there is a significant Gaeltacht areas. If you go out then towards Cashlan, Madlin, Gow, where they've got G4 as opposed to D4, where you've got the Irish language television station, Television na Gaeilge, and you've also got Radio na Gaeltacht, the Irish language service, are both based there. And then you go a bit further out and then you're into the pure Gaeltacht areas, and then you've even got the islands as well. So having Irish is important. Not having Irish and being said that you did have Irish by your leader is a challenge. And I think that's something that's not going to work well for them. And I think that this is one where you could see the old thing about a government not winning a by-election possibly being disrupted. I would say it's a 50-50 chance that Sean Kine gets in for Fine Gael. He's very popular. He'll get a good, strong first preference vote, and he'll do very well on pick-up and transfers. Former TD, so he's well got both ends. He'll get the urban side of the constituency without much doubt, where there's obviously a lot of people. And then because he is the Cúpla Focal, some Irish, and he worked hard to do that and gone through the highways and byways. I saw he's out in the Aran Islands this week. So that will help him. He's really, he's running a good campaign out there. It'll be an interesting one to see, because, that is one where it will be a big fill-up for Fine Gael and Simon Harris if they come first or second. And you could think about that. If they do that in both by-elections, that's very healthy for them, where you compare it then to getting back to Fianna Fáil, where they might be, finishing very down the pecking order in Dublin Central, but also over in Galway. It could be seen the Fianna Fáil transfers will be the one who will be helping someone like Sean Kine.
Yes, I did predict on the podcast earlier this month that I think it would be Sean Kine and Noel Thomas duking out for 1 and 2. And I wasn't aware that Noel Thomas doesn't have great Irish, or no Irish is one of the two, whereas Sean Kine does. And the fact of the matter, Noel Thomas is a very divisive figure. Very,
Yeah.
very divisive. And the polling had showed also that he wasn't picking up a whole lot in transfers also. So I actually going to stick my neck on the line. I think Sean Kyne's going to win.
Well, there could be another little factor in this as well, which is that Noel Thomas objected to a GAA sports ground in the constituency.
All right. That's a big deal.
Up around Knocknacara, I think it was. That end of it, I think. Now, his reasoning behind it was to do with the fact that it would impact on some of the smaller clubs. But at the Salt Hills side of it, which is that west part, the big urban area, you're talking about a state-of-the-art Gaelic grounds that a lot of people will want. Galway are doing pretty well at the moment, certainly in terms of the football and hurling in particular. So it's very popular to have. And, Salt Hill Knocknacara will be one of the bigger clubs, in that area, if not the country. So there's a lot of members there who have a lot of kids playing and are doing a lot of playing it themselves. And I don't think they'll take too kindly to someone objecting to investing in sports infrastructure around the area.
Yeah, it's a case of no red-blooded male is going to, object to a sports ground for the kids, are they, Vincent? Not even the United States.
No, I was just thinking this aspect of the conversation is warming my heart. It really is. This I completely understand. It's like someone running for the House of Representatives in Louisiana who voted against a bill to support Louisiana state athletics or something. Yeah, I get that. Universal condition on that one.
And there's golden rule in Irish politics as well, Richard, is you don't piss off the GAA, do you?
No, I'm anywhere. I'm particularly a big club like that. Whatever about the small little one. In the old days, the Holy Trinity, the Church, Fianna Fáil, and the GAA. The GAA is the only part of that Trinity still standing, and it's in every constituency, in every parish area. You want to keep close with it. The amount of GAA stars who've become TDs in the past is testament to how important it is within the political life and landscape in Ireland.
It is, and Vincent, you've had a number of sports stars over the years going to politics as well, haven't you? So for our listeners in the United States, when we talk about the GAA here, we're talking about, the equivalent of the NFL or the Major League Baseball or the NBA, but more likely than, more the NFL more than anything else, really. The sports and politics kind of goes hand in hand in a lot of these small little rural areas and the urban areas.
But with the caveat that, the GAA is amateur. From the outside anyways, I think it's a little easier to sort of take the moral high ground when you're on the side of the GAA. Whereas the NFL, I think even a lot of professional football fans think the NFL is kind of corrupt or money grubbing. Even our college sports now are just swimming in money too. So it's harder for people to get self-righteous about that in a way with the GAA, I think, because it's amateur and because it's small town and rural and things like that. It seems cleaner. Like, at least that's from the outside. I'm sure there are some stories I have not I am not privy to.
There's a podcast in that one, Paul.
I was just going to say that there. I have a couple of stories.
Yeah,
I have a couple of stories about smoky back rooms and fellas been threatened with sticks or hurleys. We want to be the case. And look, for the most part, it is incredibly well community run, and it's in the community where the GAA is, and that's why an Irish politician would be mad to offend them. I hadn't heard that story about Noel Thomas before, Richard, and that's why you're a wealth of this kind of information.
The other thing, though, for him is if his second preference is, as you said, he's very divisive. Now, I know he does come from Fianna Fáil gene pool, but even then, when you leave the party that you were part of, sometimes it's that the people who remain don't always necessarily want to support the person who left. So I think his second preference is a bit like the Sinn Féin in Dublin Central. Where they come from is going to be interesting and challenging for him. I think he probably needs to be ahead a good bit of Sean Kyne in the first count. If he isn't, you could see Sean Kyne picking up across a number of different ones, like Labour Party, Soc Dems, Greens. They're not going to be transferring to Noel Thomas.
No, they're not.
If it comes down to the 5th, 6th and 7th preferences of these people, if they're doing transfer left, vote left first, and all the other left ones are gone, a lot of them will stop, but a lot of them are going to go, right, of who's left, who do I think is the least worst option for me. And that then becomes Sean Klein over someone like Noel Thomas. And as someone who's actually quite popular, regardless within the constituency, irrespective of that. So even they kind of like what he's done for the constituency in the past.
Well, yes, Kine and Thomas actually originally are about 5 or 6 kilometres live away from each other in Galway, would you believe? So they're both fishing over the same geographic area. I'd echo everything you said there about Thomas being divisive. And we have, for our American listeners, Noel Thomas is the anti-immigrant candidate, for want of a better word. And Sean Kine is the government candidate. And then you have your hodgepodge of other left candidates, Social Democrats, Sinn Féin, which I said before, they're not left wing, they're a populist party, the Labour Party, and all manner of other independent left-wing parties. Richard, do you want to touch on PRS-TV for our American listeners? What exactly is it?
Sure. There's ourselves, and there's maybe someone like Malta, I think, use it. So
it is Malta, yeah.
It's a relatively complicated system. The benefit of it is to get your vote as to, overall, if a party gets 25% of the first preference votes, they'll get about 25% of the seats. So it's fairly fair in that regard. If you take it in the round, in a general election, you will have maybe 3, 4, or 5 seat constituencies. What then happens is you will obviously vote, but you vote down a ballot paper. So rather than just voting for one candidate, it will be multiple. So we've had ballots where there could be 36, I think there's been one in the last general election or something like that.
Yeah.
It's great for the paper industry because we use pen and paper. But what that does is that you can vote down as far as you want, and then you can be very surgical in terms of who you don't vote for or who you put ahead of someone else. So it's quite complex. The challenge is not necessarily you're competing against your opposition, so Fine Gael versus Fianna Fáil, for argument's sake. You're also going to have 2 or 3 candidates within your own party who can be more of a challenge to you than the actual opposition, because if there's only one seat for your party in a 3-seater and there's 2 or 3 candidates running, well, that's when the knives come out internally to see who's going to get ahead on that, and that's where the real fun can begin.
Long and short of it, for Vincent, who I saw his eyes rolling in his head there at one stage, is that you could have 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats fighting for 3 seats between them. Okay? I think that's the long and short of it, is it?
Yep, pretty much.
And it's such an alien concept when I try to explain it to people from the United States. They think I'm joking with them. they genuinely think I'm joking with them. Look at this tick yank over here and stuff like that. And I mean, no, this is how we elect people. You know, what's your most memorable by-election?
Well, my one is the famous or infamous 2009 Dublin South by-election, which
George Lee, yes, the economics correspondent with RTE, the man who would give you doom and gloom every night on the 9 o'clock news, because this was after the crash of 2008. He was on morning, noon and night as a Cassandra, and the worse things were, the happier George was, I think it's fair to say. There was a by-election in Dublin South, which is very leafy suburbs. It's very leafy, very well-to-do. Very liberal.
But Fine Gael would always have done well there. Fianna Fáil would have done well there. And at the odd time, maybe Labour might get in for the sake of it. It is a constituency that's volatile, as they like to say, because every time there's a general election, at least one of the sitting TDs will lose their seat and not be returned. So there's a bit of volatility within it. But there was a Seamus Brennan who would have been a very, well-got Fianna Fáil minister TD, passed away. And then once that happens, here comes by-election. So the Fianna Fáil were in government, and it was then an opportunity for everyone else to have a good crack at the government. Fianna Fáil tried to bring out Shay Brennan, who was the son of Seamus, he is now TD.
Yeah.
Alex White was there for Labour. And Fine Gael then pulled out the coup d'etat of enticing George Lee out from the cosseted
well-paid
confines and well-paid confines of Montrose RTE to run for Fine Gael. And it is the closest I think you would see to kind of a presidential rah-rah-rah campaign and people running up to him, kissing him in the streets, saying he was brilliant. And there was local elections on at the same time as well. So there were all these local candidates who had this twinkling of star power with George Lee there. And And Mr. Lee, as a consequence of that, they didn't need to have any of this elimination, second counts, third counts, around like that. He got in with a whopping 53.4%. So this is an incredible amount of vote for someone. There's like only half a dozen, I'd say, by-elections where someone has breached 50% and they could all run home and go home. But the kicker is that Mr. Lee found it being very difficult to be a lowly backbench TD, where, you know, potholes and lighting become very important issues as opposed to the latest missives of the IMF coming into Dublin. So within the year, Mr. Lee decided that he was better off enlightening everyone by being back in RTE. He did manage to become the agricultural correspondent and was very good at talking about bovine emissions.
Yes, I think the telling thing there was that he actually didn't quit RTE. He took a leave of absence, and the rules were there that if you come back before your 12 months leave of absence is up, you return on full pay, which was a lot of money.
We would have been earning more money than the Taoiseach of the day. So worrying about lights and potholes are taking nice coin in RTE.
Yes, I think people didn't appreciate his greatness though in Irish politics as well, I suspect.
Absolutely.
I think he kind of went into the Dáil chamber and felt that he wasn't sufficiently worshipped, and he thought, this, I'm out here, I'm out of Dodge. Let me touch on something there, actually, to what you mentioned there, Vincent, that contrast that by-election that had 8 candidates. The only 3 anybody ever remembers are the Shea Brennan, Alex White and George Lee. Nobody else remembers who else ran. But you have 8 candidates there, and you've 14 in Dublin Central, another 17 in Galway West. Does everybody think they could be a politician?
It's interesting the amount of people, like we were talking there about the general election where you've 36 candidates on at one stage on a ballot paper, you know, and realistically getting 36 votes, I think so we've gotten in the past. You know, you ain't going to become a politician, and you'd wonder why you'd want to do it. It is nearly comical, the list of people within ballot papers at this stage. And I think that it's just relatively easy, obviously, to get on a ballot paper in Ireland. The cost of entry, so to speak, is very low. You don't need packs and mega books to be able to do it.
The bar is actually quite low in Ireland, you know. And what would you do to make it higher, Richard? At the risk of me labelling you a despot, a dictator, and all manner of terrible things.
Yes, apart from benevolent dictatorships, which we all know are great for the person who thinks that they're going to be it. I would like kind of like a minimum national threshold for someone to have to get into it all, which would be, I think, more beneficial and might help us get over some of the parish pump politics we have. You do want democracy, but like a higher level to get your deposit back, maybe something like that, and maybe, you know, needing even more signatures there, or, you know, a higher deposit to sign up to even run. You know, maybe have it more than a National Lottery scratch card, and, you know, have something meaningful, like even 2 cups of Starbucks.
What's the current quota that you have to poll at to get your deposit back?
Is it 12.5%?
12.5%, is it something mad? So you have to get 12.5% of the first preference vote or overall vote.
Vote, because it depends, because some people get eliminations and try and stay in, so they can survive, because if you spent a lot of money on it, and that's actually another thing for Mr. Martin, that Fianna Fáil at the presidential election wouldn't have got their money back on that one. So that's for it.
100k. They were 100 grand deep in that.
Not a nice check to be writing, not getting anything back.
Yeah, and I've looked at some of the digital spending by some political parties and at the moment and around the by-elections, and there seems to be more money going into digital spending than there is posters now these days. So I think that's a big factor as well in spending, isn't it?
It is, and it's funny because posters were the be-all and end-all. The benefit, I think, of digital spending is you can't get electrocuted when you're hanging off and trying to hang up a poster on a dark night in a dangerous road. But I think it's this micro-targeting, and it is where you're trying to find out where people are. It is a whole new area. The old days with posters, at least you could see there were posters up. You know, you get your piece of paper invoice. It's a little bit more challenging to see what ads are going where and who's seeing them. And that's one, I think, longer term to look at. And we've seen it in other countries where you might have the rules and you might have the legislation, but enforcing it's going to be much more challenging in this area.
Yes, a person called Liz Carlin on the briefing.ie had flagged this, and I wasn't aware of it. So if you're interested in politics and spending and where money intersects there with social media, she's a good person to be looking up. So she released some numbers last week. Like Fine Gael have spent 70 grand on digital spending. It's self-reporting.
You mean 70 million, right? As an American.
No, it's 70 grand. This is not the United States, Vincent.
No.
This is not North Carolina, my friend. It's actually only 70 grand, which is a lot for. I don't ever remember 70 grand being spent by a political party on a by-election. Richard, do you remember that much money being spent on a by-election? 2 by-elections?
No, because your SIPO levels will cap you off. I assume 30 or 40 grand. I think is typically what you would do in a channel per maybe up to that per candidate, and then party headquarters has to take some off. That is a good chunk of change to be going on digital.
Well, it's self-reporting. It's on the Fine Gael website at the moment. So Fianna Fáil are in for 40 grand. The Sockies in for 35. Sinn Féin in for 30. Labour, surprisingly enough, in for 18. I don't know where to get them money from. Independent Ireland are not campaigning in Dublin Central. Okay. Galway West, they've spent 15 grand on digital spending. People before profit who are polling 3% in the polling. We have to do a podcast on these guys some of these days because they won 2 TDs, about 4 or 5 councillors, and they're on TV all the bloody time. I don't know, is there something similar in the United States, Vincent?
Not anymore. There was the Green Party here had a brief moment where I think their attention vastly outstripped their representation, which was like two state legislature seats in the entire country. But no, in the Trump era, it's basically just really a 2-party system in the eyes of the media.
So in Dublin Central at the moment, 120 grand has been spent on digital advertising, and in Galway West is 110,000. And I think, Richard, I've never seen that kind of money been thrown about before. I genuinely haven't.
No, not at all. Like, you should be able to run a good campaign for a lot less than that. I think like 20 grand is a lot of money to be able to do. Maybe in a by-election you might do a little bit more, but like that is a big chunk of change to be spending on things other than posters and leaflets and
posters, leaflets, with micro targeting on Facebook. I'm guessing that kind of crap. Yeah. I mean, it's bloody nuts.
Yeah, and I it'll be interesting. Hopefully there's some boffin somewhere going to look at the effectiveness of all that.
Yes, I wonder about it as well. It's because Ireland is so small. Your candidate probably knows everybody. If you go to rural Ireland and parts of rural Ireland and you're out with a candidate and you knock on the front door, there's a good chance they know each other. You're not going to need Facebook to micro-target this guy to go, he aligns with your reviews. You probably do because the priest told you at Mass. And that's the reality. So I'd love to see the efficacy of these micro-targeting ads on Facebook and what have you.
Well, the old days with the electoral registers where you go around and old school, you tick off people's house they will be, because there will be houses that you'd automatically drop out of because you knew they would be definitely voting for another party, and there'd be ones that you knew would definitely be yours, and there'd be ones in the middle that you'd be fighting for, and you'd be getting whatever information that you needed from an area. And you could check that back in then afterwards at your tallies and see what happened. So, there's a lot of data and information that people would have already had. And I'm not sure a couple of TikTok videos is going to move the dial too much versus the good old fashioned going and meeting the people.
People face to face, yes.
Face to face and being able to explain your views or whatever. And generally speaking, and I know there's been a coarsening of political discourse, but generally speaking, I think when you call to someone's house and you have a word with them, it's generally a relatively positive interaction. So most people are polite in the door. So therefore, if you're stepping away from that area and relying more on digital campaigning, I think you are going to miss a trick.
Yes, of course. The problem with a face-to-face campaigning, as we saw during the week, was with Bertie Ahern. Gotcha. People on their Ring doorbells recording everything. And, as a politician, and this from running elections yourself, Richard, politicians have a tendency to promise you, the earth, moon and stars and whatever else you're having when you're face to face on the door and there's nobody else recording or watching. Unfortunately, they're uploaded to Facebook, uploaded to TikTok, uploaded to Twitter, Snapchat, Pornhub, whatever you're taking yourself. They're uploaded to everywhere. And we're going to see a real kind of shift in how politicians interact with people on the doorsteps, I think, when they know they're being recorded.
They're going to behave more like they do when they're on Morning Ireland.
Do you think?
They're going to start giving vanilla answers on the doorstep as well.
Yes, no more gotchas.
No, well, if you're smart, any new candidates you have, you tell them to look at their social media accounts well in advance, and when they're on the doorstep with talking to anyone, or at any stage, always assume there's a live mic somewhere.
Yes, of course. Richard, do you have any final insights into what might happen on Friday? As you look at the tea leaves, read the runestones?
I think this election, as we said, it's going to be bad for Fianna Fáil, but Micheál Martin, there's a deal done there. I'm sure that he's safe until the new year, and then everyone else will have at it and he'll go off into the sunset. I think for Fine Gael, it's been, it's been tough for them in government, obviously. They've been in government for quite a while now, but I think doing well in Central and possibly winning in Galway West will be a great fill-up for Simon Harris and his front bench. And I think that'll be interesting for them, particularly if they're going to be taking on the Rove Taoiseach next in the rotating Taoiseach. For Sinn Féin, as we said, challenge there is if they don't do well in first preferences in Central, there's going to be a lot of questions asked by Mary Lou MacDonald. And on the Galway side, that they're already toast. Social Democrats will be able to hail, obviously, what they're doing in Central will work well for them. Labour will be happy to be treading water, and the Greens will be happy to be still back somewhat relevant again. And I don't think that kind of hard right will make the inroads or breakthroughs that they want to do, which most sane people obviously don't want them to do.
Well, Richard, thank you first and foremost for being the first guest on and taking time out from your incredibly busy day from reading the runestones for other people in society these days. Thank you so much, Richard, and I'll catch up with you very, very soon.
Been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Richard. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.